Just one moment, waiting for my friend to join. My name is Cleve Corner. I'm the manager of author and speaker engagement. Thank you all for coming out on this Saturday Memorial Day weekend. I'm so happy to have Judith Krummeck here to talk about her new book. Before we start, a little housekeeping. First and foremost, the book is available and for sale through the Ivy Bookshop, who are outside of these doors. So if you don't already have a copy, I encourage you to purchase one, and Judith will be more than happy to chat with you after the program and sign your book. I also want to mention, as we're talking promotions, Leslie Mallon, who is our moderator this evening, is also the founder of the Chesapeake Theater Company, and they have the Merry Wives of Windsor coming up June 14th to July 21. These postcards will be out at the back table there, so if you want to check it out, please do so. Kids get in free, and the shuttle bus is back, evidently. Yes, there it is. Sophia, no shuttle buses. We're not doing shuttle buses. But anyway, please check it out. Judith and Leslie will speak for about 45 minutes, of a 45-minute discussion. Then we'll have time for your questions, about 15 minutes of your questions. Raise your hand. Leslie will call on you, and then she'll repeat your question. This program is hybrid, so not only are you folks in person enjoying it, but we have folks that are watching on our Facebook and YouTube pages. And the program will be archived there as well afterwards. So if you can't make it to one of our programs, I'd say 90% of them are hybrid. And you can go to the Pratt YouTube or Facebook page, watch it there, or watch the archive program. Oops. Apologies. Here comes my colleague, who is 20 years younger than me, to fix this. Thank you, Sean. I will now be hearing about that for the next month. Today, I'm happy to welcome Judith Krummeck to the Pratt Library to discuss her novel, The Deceived Ones. In it, she follows Vira, displaced by the Russian invasion and carrying little but her precious viola da gamba, a refugee in the Uniting for Ukraine program. When she is physically attacked soon after her arrival in the United States, the terrifying experience prompts her to hide in plain sight by passing as her twin, Sevastyan.
Sevastyan.
Sevastyan. Sevastyan? I told you I'd mess it up. I did my best. I should have. Until he is able to join her. Vera's deception incites a hilarious myriad of misconceptions, resulting in a tangled love triangle, which becomes even more convoluted when the real brother comes looking for his sister. This afternoon, Judith Krummeck will be joined in conversation by Chesapeake Shakespeare Company founder Leslie Mallon. Judith Krummeck is the author of a memoir and essays, Beyond the Baobab, about her immigration from Africa to America, and the biographical memoir, Old New Worlds, a finalist in the 2020 Next Generation Indie Book Awards and the 14th Annual National Indie Excellence Awards. She holds an MFA in Creative Writing and Publishing Arts from the University of Baltimore, and she is the evening drive time host for Maryland's classical music station, WBJC. Judith is a recipient of a creativity grant from the Maryland State Arts Council. Leslie Mallon is the founder of the Chesapeake Shakespeare Company and has served as its chief executive since 2003. She managed CSC's building renovation of an 1886 bank into its award-winning modern Shakespeare Playhouse, as well as the associated $6.7 million capital campaign. She served for 2 decades as board vice president at the Lark, a new play development center in New York City, where she was once managing director. She was on the executive committee of the International Shakespeare Theater Association for 5 years and organized its 2017 conference that was held in Baltimore. Her 30 acting credits at the Chesapeake Shakespeare Company includes roles in Hamlet, Henry V, and Much Ado About Nothing, to name just a few. It's my great pleasure to welcome Judith Krummeck and Leslie Mallon to the Pratt Library.
Thank you all so much for being here. I am sure that all of you are as big fans of Judith Krummeck as I am. As you know, Judith is the dulcet-voiced host of WBJC, which is where I first encountered her when I first moved to Baltimore in 1999, 1998. Were you were here by then? Yeah. And I am now about to pick up. And I was knocked out by her. I'm a theater person. I was knocked out by her voice. Who is this woman with this gorgeous voice? I must meet her. And so I made every opportunity to once I was running a Shakespeare festival. And she has been very kind and interviewed me on WBJC numerous times. And so I am filled with nerves at having to interview her. But I know she will be gracious and lovely, as she always is. Judith, hello.
So absolutely wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much, Leslie. I mean, I've watched what you've done with this company from its inception, when it was this quite small, sort of almost flirting with community company, and now it's one of the major players in classical theater in the country. So really well done with that.
See, this is why she's such a good interviewer.
Yeah.
All right, but I get to say nice things about you. Your wonderful novel was just published by Loyola University's Apprentice House. It's set in Baltimore. It's based on Shakespeare, so there are abounding opportunities for mistaken identity, but you have truly forged your own story here with really rich themes of immigrant identity, public transportation, gender identity, crime, and the joys and mysteries of music. And I would say Baltimore itself is perhaps the richest character of all. But I'm going to start by asking, how did this question originally, how did this idea originally come to you?
I think that certainly of all the Shakespeare canon, Twelfth Night has always been right up in the top 5.
You're right.
And I love it for many reasons. One is that incredibly strong sibling bond. We know that the Olivia character is mourning for her dead brother. And then there is, of course, this very strong bond between the two twins. And I was intensely close to my late brother. And so that was a theme that really resonated strongly with me. And I think that's perhaps an obvious theme. One that maybe is not as obvious, but which has really become more and more of a feature for me as long as I've lived here, was the fact that Viola and Sevastyan arrive in Illyria in Shakespeare's play. They don't know anybody. They are, sort of, they fetch up there and they have to find their way. And it is such a strong migrant story for me in that regard. And having been an immigrant myself, I wanted to take that idea and really play with it and look at the idea of migration from multiple perspectives. So it's not only that the twins are refugees, it's also that we have immigrants who are documented, we have undocumented immigrants. We have this whole idea of migration and the mixture of nationalistic identity that meant I had lots of opportunities to look at the issue of immigration from so many different perspectives.
And the longing for home is really
Right,
palpable
yes,
as well
right,
in all
yes.
these variations.
Exactly. Yes, yes.
Well, let's start by talking a little bit about Twelfth Night, and why don't you talk a little bit about why you love it so much?
So, aside from those two reasons, I think what is so fascinating about the play is that, yes, it's a comedy, it has a happy ending, and by that definition of a comedy, this is a comedy. But there are also dark elements in it. Not the least of which is unrequited love, which is never any fun. and and then there's also the invention of Shakespeare's comic characters. We know that famously he was always borrowing from other sources, and that was definitely the case with Twelfth Night. But his own invention.
Would you mention something about the title, please?
Oh, yes. So the earliest form that we know was a Renaissance play that came out of Siena. And it was a group of people who put together this play. They wrote it, and it's an Italian name that I find beyond challenging to be able to say, but the translation is The Deceived Ones. And so that's what made me decide to call it this. So that's the earliest source. The next source is Bandello, who wrote what we would nowadays call short stories, and Shakespeare borrowed a lot from those. And then a contemporary of his was an ex-military man who decided in his retirement to write some short stories. And the one that was the closest source for Shakespeare was actually borrowed from Bandello. But because it was written in English, that was the closest connection that Shakespeare had to that. So he borrowed this theme of mistaken identity and cross-dressing, and the young woman dressing up as a man. But what he brought to the table himself were the comic characters. So
which is a very common thing for him, where he would take the serious plot from somewhere else, and then I assume, from all the people that he grew up with and met at the pub, those were the comic characters.
Right. And so we don't have a Falstaff, but we do have Malvolio, one of the most famous comic characters. So Malvolio, we have Toby Belch, we have Andrew Aguecheek, we have Feste, we have Mariah. So all of these comic characters, and that brings in a much darker tone, strangely enough. The fact that the comic characters are what make me feel that it is a somewhat dark play, particularly in the way that Toby Belch and his cohorts torture. I think torture is not too strong a word, torture Malvolio, and it's really quite cruel. And it's a part of the play that I find quite difficult. And that light and shade was really fascinating for me. And it was one of the reasons why I wanted to set it in Baltimore. So today, if you take the New York Times, you know that Baltimore didn't really get a very glowing report. So we are the fentanyl capital. We have nationally the most deaths from overdoses. And that is a really, really dark side of the underbelly of Baltimore. But it also
We sit in a room like this.
we sit in a
in
room
a
like
library
this.
like this.
Exactly, that was gifted to the city. We have the Chesapeake Shakespeare Theatre, we have Everyman, we have Center Stage, we have world-class art museums, we have a world-class symphony orchestra, uh, music conservatoire. So we have all these utterly extraordinary things that the city can offer, as well as being just really beautiful and some fascinating architecture. So it's that light and shade in Baltimore that also made me feel this was absolutely the place to set a play like this.
So I thought that Twelfth Night would be a good place to ask you if you would read from one of the chapters of The Deceived One, and it's from Twelfth Night. It's when Viola first meets Olivia and charms Olivia. So, but here's our version with Vira and Isabella.
Isabella. So, what was interesting when I was looking through to find a passage to read, I wanted, because I'm in discussion with a Shakespearean authority, and it is based on Shakespeare, I did want to look for a piece that where I had borrowed from Shakespeare's play. And as I was going through, it was quite interesting to me that I saw how far I've actually departed from the original. So, although this is a scene that was absolutely based on this particular first meeting of, Vera and Viola, dressed up in this instance as Cesario. And here, Isabella, Vera, has already taken on the persona of her twin Sevastyan. So, as far as Isabella is concerned, she is a young man. Isabella looks towards the open doorway, trying to take on a calm expression. Well, excuse me, but are you Isabella Foyani? Yes, I am she. You do not look like your photographs. Isabella feels a little stung by this, as if it underscores her feeling of unloveliness. The Beethoven String Quartet comes to an end, and the back announcement identifies it as the first Razumovsky Quartet. Ballet music by Tchaikovsky will be up next. Well, says Isabella again, I think I can guess why you're here. Orson Karadin has composed beautiful music for you to sing. As I have repeatedly told him, I am not performing at the moment. But this is not like other performing. It is music that he has made especially for your voice. Oh, come now. No voice is as unique as that. I'm a soprano. I have a good ear for intonation. I have a competent sense of rhythm. I've mastered coloratura technique. I can sing in a range of styles. Any professional singer could lay claim to those qualities. None of them makes me unique. These things that you list, they are what is outside. It is what is inside you that makes you unique, as you say. It is how you understand music in your heart. Were you sent here to flatter me? No, I know your voice from the Venus Hottentot, And I have heard Orson Carradine's music also in his new opera. No other soprano can sing it like you. Isabella studies this unusual young man who speaks with such simple authority. For a moment, just a moment, his praise of the music and her voice is alluring, almost tempting. What is it? She asks. It is someone who mourns her loss. It is music that is sad, but also there is longing and hope. He pauses, his face alight. When she doesn't respond, he says, it goes forward and back in modulations between major and minor. It is old and new all at once. Isabella looks away from his animated face to the bright day outside. The brightness is like an insult to the leaden feeling inside herself. Why can't anyone understand that she is too tired, too depleted to give herself over to the voracious needs of composers and directors and fellow musicians and audiences? I can, she begins, but suddenly she can't trust herself to speak further because she feels emotion tightening her throat. In the silence between them, the Tchaikovsky excerpt comes to an end on the radio. The announcer introduces a Handel aria, and after a short instrumental introduction, Isabella's own voice bursts into the room. It is velvety and true, with the purity of a boy's treble voice, but the warmth of a quickly vibrating violin. Sevastyan abruptly stands and crosses the room to sit at the ottoman next to Isabella's feet. Miss Foyani, she turns her face to him, startled. If I had your gift, as wonderful as it is, I would never hold it back. I could not do it. Her heart stills and she says, what would you do? I would have to share it. Like when a drop in water makes waves to spread out in circles, getting bigger and bigger. Like, he seems to grope for the word, like echoes that you hear over and over. His eyes dart intently from one to the other of hers. I would do everything to keep it alive, and I would protect it every moment of my day and night like something I loved, my child or lover or brother. He lowers his voice. And even if it was difficult, if it made me sad, I could not let it go. I would give my life to it. Isabella looks into the green eyes that are fixed on her. Your child or your lover or your brother would be blessed, she says. She reaches for the remote and clicks off the radio mid-note. She doesn't want her voice competing with this passionate young man.
Thank you. Thank you. So that passage is so lovely, and one of the things that's most striking, I think, about it is the beauty in the way you write about music and understanding it and what it's like perhaps to perform it and feel it. And you yourself spend every day of your life among classical music, and you're married to a musician. So obviously, and you know, the much of the book is set at Peabody. It's shot through with musicians. And so why don't you talk to us a little bit about how it is writing about something that is unwritable?
It is unwritable. I mean, you come across somebody like Alex Ross in The New Yorker, and he's consummate. Even he struggles, it is really difficult to try to pin down something that is so ephemeral and that is so deeply personal. Where every response to a piece of music is subjective. The reason that I was drawn to making it such a strong musical milieu was twofold. One is that the play opens, if music be the food of love, play on, that just begs for a musical setting. The other thing is that this was my first true foray into fiction. So my previous book that Cleve mentioned, Old New Worlds, it's a biographical memoir, and a lot of the biographical segment of the book uh, was something that needed to be fleshed out. The research material that I had was very bare bones, and I needed to reimagine her life to a great extent. So that gave me a taste of what it would be like to write fiction. And I wanted to see if I could write a whole book like that. But it was a leap. It was something that was not familiar to me. And so I wanted to put it in a setting in which I felt 100% at home. And so I wanted also to give a nod to the Elizabethan era, even though it is absolutely contemporary in its setting and its place. And so that was why I decided to have the Vira character playing a viola da gamba. And it sort of then opens up all sorts of possibilities for the Orsino character, who is a composer and a pianist, and wanting to pull in that sense of Elizabethan music, but yet give it his own contemporary stamp. And so coming to the idea of writing as for the orchestra, in a sense, using a whole chest of violas da gamba for the setting, for the background. And the whole process of trying to make something out of nothing, it was something that terrified me about writing at the outset. I had never ever thought that I would be a writer, because that really frightens me. To suck something out of your thumb to that enormous extent. And so I the the idea of trying to get an idea onto the page. I find myself much more comfortable with the editing process. Once that raw material is on the page, honing it is much more manageable. But that taking nothing and it's all in your head and it's magnificent and you walk around with it all day and you drive to work and you know exactly how that scene is going to go, and you come to put it on the page and it just dissipates. It's really it's really it's really difficult. And it seemed to me that composing would be a similar analogy. And so the idea of Orson being a composer kind of fed into that idea as well. And then, as you mentioned, being married to a musician, I've watched him make music, and the whole rehearsal process and I mean, it's like acting in a way, because invariably you are, well, not invariably, but often you are making music with other people. And so that rehearsal process, learning to trust that other person, learning to match your timing to their timing. So I felt as if I could bring an acting background to this, as well as a writing background, and use that to explore the whole idea of music. And so, you know, who knows how successfully one can ever write about this sort of thing. All I can say, and I'm thankful for this, the musicians who have read it so far seem not to have cringed at what I've done.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You mentioned your background as a theater person, and one of the things that I find particularly interesting is that you've given each character in the play, almost every character, including really minor ones like Curtis, their own chapters, and it's kind of taking it from an actor's perspective in a funny sort of way, because, for the actor who is playing Curtis, that is the most important character on stage, and he must have a fully fleshed out experience and background and how he feels about the moment. And so getting to sort of excavate how each character feels in the moment is really quite delightful.
Thank you. And one of the reasons that I wanted to write it from multiple point of view like this is again a nod to Shakespeare, because when you go to the theater, you are presented with a whole, but you interpret that whole through the collective work of every actor on the stage. And so every single performer is bringing their own identity, their own subjectivity to the overall process. And so I wanted, in a sense, to recreate that multi-dimensional feeling of experiencing a play where you have this character's point of view because he's the one who is speaking. And as Leslie says, he is the most important person in that moment. And so it felt, you can see the dynamic that flows between the characters when you're watching them on the stage. And it felt like an idea to give a homage to that whole process of theater by letting them speak for themselves through this process.
It seems to me that it is incumbent upon me to say that, while you have stolen your plot from Shakespeare, Shakespeare was, of course, notorious for stealing all of his plots from other people. So you are walking in greatness.
Good company, right?
You talked a good bit about Baltimore, and as I said, Baltimore, just blossoms in the manuscript, and I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about, you came here about the same time that I did, and now, it is the place where each of us has lived the longest, and it is truly home, and a place that I think both of us feel really strongly about, trying to make as beautiful as possible. And I wondered if you would talk a little bit about bringing it to life in The Deceived Ones.
So starting with the dark side, I needed to have a plausible reason for Vera to want to take on some kind of disguise. And the way to do that was to give her a really shaking experience quite early on. And so that is the dark side of the city. So she's physically attacked, and in her fright, she decides to try to hide in plain sight. So I felt that it was, much as I love the city, as Leslie does, I felt it was important to bring the other aspects of the city to the fore as well. I didn't want to idolize it, but nevertheless, it is a city that has been really, really kind to me. And so I wanted to try to investigate what it's like for somebody who has never lived in Baltimore, what it's actually like to live in the city in terms of how do you take public transportation? What are the various aspects of the city which is so distinctly neighborhood based and oriented? It has a Ukrainian segment of the city with that exquisite cathedral. It has the musical center of the Mount Vernon area where Peabody is set. It has this gorgeous evergreen museum and library, and I wanted to set a scene there, and so and also I have the twins while they're taking the public transport, looking around them and drawing parallels to what they know of their city of Lviv, but also then just giving a sense of what the city looks like, with its row houses and its Art Nouveau buildings and that kind of sense. So it was important to me, I think, to make it. I mean, I will say that I started writing just about an East Coast city. I didn't really specify, but the more I worked on the story, the more it seemed to make sense that Baltimore could become a character, and that it would enhance their stories, that she could just walk from Peabody to this renovated building, a bank, interestingly, since you renovated the bank for your theater.
So many beautiful banks in
Yeah.
Baltimore.
and you know that where I did my MFA program, also a beautifully renovated bank at the University of Baltimore. So where Isabella lives, and you know, that she could walk there, and that it is in many respects a walkable city, that it is in some respects a beautiful city, but also that it is a gritty city. And so I wanted, as much as I was trying to make the human characters multifaceted, I wanted to try and see if I could make the city that way too.
Well, you've certainly achieved
Yeah,
that.
thank you.
I recommend it to everyone just on the Baltimoreness of it alone. Something nobody has really, I've been, listening to other people and your conversations with Tom Hall, for instance, but something that nobody has really talked to you much about is the question of gender roles, which, Twelfth Night is notorious for this, and right now it's all the rage, as we are talking more as Gen Z is thinking more and more about gender roles. Twelfth Night is one of their favorite Shakespeare plays to look at and examine, and it seems to me that writing about gender roles right now and gender fluidity is kind of a minefield. And so, did you feel did you feel trepidatious about that, in making sure that you were giving full dimensionality to the question?
There's no doubt that the issues of gender and sexuality can be as contentious as the issues of immigration these days. And so I was very aware of that potential in both of those areas that I was writing about. And so for both of those issues, I wanted to try to look into the humanity of it, that it's not that this immigrant is a faceless anomaly who's come to steal my job, but that they have their own inner life, their own history, their own reasons for wanting to live in a different place. The same for the gender issues. And so with Shakespeare, of course, in his time, all the women were played by young boys. And so it was very easy for him to use that mechanism a lot. It was very comfortable. But, if you're writing a novel in the 21st century, it's difficult to make it plausible. And so I thought a lot about the issues of androgyny and um, how trans behavior and trans choices are becoming so much more talked about in a really good way, in a positive way. That's not to say that there aren't still detractors, but I think that we are now able to have a more open conversation about these issues. My beloved brother would have benefited from a society like this. For him, it was really a struggle. And so I was bringing some of that into the writing of this. I have a very beloved nephew who has been traveling this journey. And so, and the nephew is beloved in the way that he's always been beloved, and still continuing his thoughts and dreams, and he is the person I've loved from when I held his bird-like weight shortly after he was born. So as I say, it's the humanity. So I wanted to look inside these stories, but also I did need to find a way to make it plausible. And that was another reason why a musical setting seemed to lend itself. I think an arts environment is much more open to the acceptance of people for who they are, and not necessarily how they choose to present. Um,
It's
and
funny
the-
you should say that, because I was just in a business setting with young business people, and I kept looking around going, where are the non-binary people? Why aren't there any trans people in this room? What's wrong? Where are the tattoos?
Right. Yes, so I think absolutely. So, a musical setting would absolutely lend itself to that. But then having said all of that, it needed to be something that I could make this gender issue believable for a contemporary audience. The fact that Vera would in fact look enough like Sevastyan to be confusing, and so that was part of that challenge. But then also I didn't want to single her out, and so I wanted to look at gender and sexuality issues in other contexts as well. And so um, when the Orsino character starts to have these um, confusing feelings for someone that he thinks is male, he starts to question his own orientation. Um, there is a lesbian in the book, just because that's her choice. That it just is. I didn't want to make it. I didn't want to make it a contentious issue or something that stood out as being out of the ordinary. That is just who this character is. Um, so I wanted to feed in other thoughts about gender as well, in terms of how it is just integral to who these characters are, and it's not something. I wanted to take away the contention, I suppose, is a way of looking at it, as I wanted to take away the contention that surrounds the whole immigration theme.
Um, you mentioned your brother, and one of the really deeply moving, I was going to say sections, but it's throughout, is Vira and Sevastyan's relationship, which is just deeply. I don't have a sibling, and yet I was longing for one. And you mentioned your brother, and I just wondered if you wanted to talk a little bit about how important that is, because it just leaps off the page in its dimensionality.
So there are two things relating to my brother. We actually, I mourn that you don't have a sibling. The siblings are very special, and they can, as I'm sure you have learned, even if you don't have a blood sibling, you can find siblings in other characters. And my niece, for instance, I feel with her that she's not only a niece, she's also almost like a sister, almost like a daughter, and definitely a bestie. So I think that you can find, these relationships in many ways. But with Peter, my brother, we really looked very much alike. I remember one of the friends of my parents saying to me once, "Stop sitting there and looking like Peter." And we really did. I think, you know, the sort of strong jawbone, high cheekbones works much better on a man. You know, he was an extraordinarily beautiful man. And he, in many respects, was my mentor. He was 7 years older than me, and a lot of the things that were and remain deeply important to me came through him. He was also somebody who was blessed with an extraordinary capacity for empathy. And I like to think that he taught me some of that. And we were extremely intuitive about each other. And when he was dying, we would, you know, go on Zoom, and I would, you know, kind of be able to follow what the process of the end of life process was for him. Um, and even if he didn't articulate it verbally, I felt as if that was part of what I understood about him in those last months. And then the other aspect of him that I bring strongly into the book is that I didn't make it back to Cape Town in time to see him again. And so, you know, there is, as we know in the play, the Olivia character is in mourning for her brother. And so that was a transition that just fell into place for me. And she feels that same sense of responsibility for not seeing him that one last time. But I think I was able to draw on the relationship with Peter hugely from that sense of intuiting each other's emotions and the sense that we really did look startlingly alike. So, so yeah. So I think you know, in my dedication, I say, you know, my twin in orbit age, and I think that is true to a large extent. And the whole sibling relationship, it's something that really is precious, and you must try and find a sibling outside of your blood
I
sibling.
have one. It's all right. It's all right. Don't you worry about me. All right. So we are heading toward a question time. So while I have a number of other questions, it's time for our lightning round, Judith. Judith did not know about lightning rounds. So, favorite Baltimore writer?
I have to say Anne Tyler. And I think that
You're not wrong.
I think also I just loved her Vinegar Girl, which was a take on Taming of the Shrew. And so while I didn't borrow from her, she certainly was at the back of my mind when I was first conceiving this approach. And what I love about her writing is how ordinary it seems. It's not, of course, it's extraordinary, but she writes about things that are so relatable, and the way that she has people reacting to each other or not, you know, missing each other's meaning, or and also how Baltimore is such a character in all her books. So she's the first one that pops to mind.
Your favorite composer?
So I'm only allowed one. Then I think I have to say Schubert. I think I have to say Schubert. For the diversity of his writing. So whether he's writing piano music or orchestral music or chamber music, he was just extraordinary. The sense of lyrical line, the way that he would just he's such an intimate writer, and I really respond to that.
Favorite crab house?
I have no idea.
moving on. Your favorite line from Twelfth Night?
It may be the opening line.
Well, I would have thought so, but I had to ask.
Yes.
For
yeah.
me, it's how will this fadge?
Oh, yes.
Thompson, you will know that. Jean Thompson was our director of marketing for many years at Chesapeake Shakespeare. Okay. Your favorite Shakespeare play?
Well,
Okay, not Twelfth Night.
not Twelfth Night. If it's not Twelfth Night, then, it just breaks my heart so much. But I suppose Romeo and Juliet. I suppose so. I want to throttle those people who didn't get the messages through. But and that the whole fate theme, I find it really hard to take. I find the fate theme in Romeo and Juliet as hard to take as I find the torture scene of Malvolio hard to take in Twelfth Night. But nevertheless, I do think it's an extraordinary play and just so exquisite. Yeah,
Such beautiful poetry, as you have in many spots. Okay, so it is now time to take questions. So, and if people are too shy, then I have other questions to ask Judith. How long did you take to find your protagonist's voice?
That is a very interesting and multifaceted question because of writing it from multiple points of view. So I was having to reinvent myself each time I was taking on the new chapter. So if by the main protagonist we are meaning Vira, arguably we could say that she's the main protagonist, as arguably I think we could say Viola is the main character in Twelfth Night. And to find her voice, when answering the question about how long it takes you, I suppose it takes you as long as it takes to write the first draft, because the first draft, as so many writers like to say, the first draft is you telling yourself the story, and then every subsequent edit is honing that so that it becomes a story that other people will relate to and identify with and empathize with. So in that first draft, I was finding the voice for Vera that would be someone who was introverted and someone who was intuitive, shy, tentative, and yet with a strange sort of undercurrent of courage, of just sticking to itness, if there isn't such a word, I know, but I've just made it up. And someone who saw herself through someone else's eyes, as she did through her twins, or does through her twin, but also somebody who comes into her own in the course of the book as a person who finds that she can actually find agency in how she runs her life and takes control of her life. And yeah, I mean, really, it took me the first draft to find that voice. Yeah.
Joanna, do you listen to music while you write? What a good question.
I can. So my dear spouse has learned to become very quiet around the house when I'm writing. And if he wants to practice the piano, that's fine. I work with my door closed, so as long as I'm not in the same room as the piano, because then I'm wanting to listen to the lines. But if it's through a closed door, I can listen to him practicing the piano. I can't listen to him practicing the French horn. That is just too present. And I can't listen to him listening to opera, because in the minute there are any words in there, then I'm listening for the words. So I don't choose to listen to music. I don't. There are some people who need to listen to music to write. I prefer absolute silence, but if there is classical non-verbal music going on, I can work with that.
Please. The question is about the viola da gamba, the exotic Renaissance Baroque instrument that is kind of like if a lute and a cello had a baby.
Right. So interestingly about the viola da gamba, it comes from the lute family, and but it looks like a cello, but they're actually different families. So the lute is a plucked instrument. You know, that family, it's plucked, and it has frets. Although the viola da gamba is bowed, but the strings, the strings, the violin, viola, cello, and bass are all one particular family, and then the viola da gamba belongs to the other. And it's hard to put my finger on the germ of the idea, John, about why I wanted to have this. And yes, as I say, it was a nod to the Elizabethan era, but it could have been, a virginal. It could have been a lute. It could even have been a guitar. And I wanted it to be the viola da gamba for a reason that I actually can't articulate. But I did want it to be something that was unusual and exotic. I needed the Orsino character to be fascinated by it and intrigued by it. And um, I wanted him to have a reason to think of why she would be a good ambassador to go to Isabella to try to make her sing in his opera. And I thought that having such a distinct and unusual instrument in 21st century Baltimore, played by a Ukrainian refugee, the sort of non-juxtapositions of those ideas really appeal to me. Does that answer your question? Oh, good.
Plus, of course, it shares the name with Shakespeare's heroine.
Exactly so.
So it's
Yes,
especially-
yes. I have to say that was subliminal. A friend of mine pointed that out to me, and she said, "This is, well done." And I couldn't take credit for it, but yes, it does
Of course,
reflect
you can take
Viola.
credit for it. It was in your brain. It just wasn't at the top of it.
Any other questions?
The question is about writing process, regular time, regular space. Do you chew on the carpet?
So, as I was saying earlier, the most difficult part of writing is that getting this amorphous, floating idea to make sense on the page. And that's why I need absolute silence to do that. And I also have found through trial and error that I can do that better in the morning. So I try to carve out at least an hour a day if I can. and some people write by word count. Stephen King writes 1,000 words a day. If he's done that by 9, well, then he's got the rest of the day to himself. If he hasn't managed it by 10 o'clock, well, then he's got to keep at it until he goes to bed. I don't find it as useful to write by word count. So I set aside at least an hour. If it's more than that, huge bonus, it's fantastic. Because I think I'm not alone in telling you that to get down to writing is it for some reason it's difficult to get it back into the zone. Once you're in the zone, it's really hard to pull out of it too. So an hour is, it's an optimum time. It's and it does need to be morning. I can edit in the evening, strangely enough. So if I can come back to it later on. So the way that I will start a writing session is to read over a little bit of what I've done, probably try to read as much as I can of what I read the day before, just so that I am feeding the tone and getting a sense of sort of where I am with the characters and where I'm wanting to go. Some people will also leave something sort of half written or unwritten, so that they've got to pick up something when they get back to writing. That hasn't really worked for me either. So, so the process for me is at least an hour, morning preferably, absolute silence if possible.
Okay, I think we have time for probably one more question. Oh my gosh. I'm going to what an excellent question. What are you working on next?
It also has a musical theme. So it's, and it's fiction again. It has to be because it's based on a real person. But again, the information that I have is too tenuous to be able to write it as a biography. So it's a woman called Christiane Lessler, and she was an immigrant from Germany in the 1700s with her family. And she became part of the Ephrata cloister in Pennsylvania. And she is one of the first named female American composers in America. And so she's in the Library of Congress in the Ephrata Codex. And her story fascinates me. I'm not religious myself. And so I'm fascinated what made her give herself over to this extremely stringent, some people have even called it a cult. I wouldn't go that far, but it was a very stringent community. And how she found her musical voice. I'm quite fascinated with that. So that's my work in progress at the moment. So, thank you.
How long do you think? What a terrible question. I'll take that. So I think that's all the time, all that we have time for, but please do get your copy of The Deceived Ones, which is such a delightful read. You will have a wonderful time reading it. It is a love letter to Baltimore. It is a love letter to immigration. It is a love letter to siblings. It is a love letter to music. It is a love letter to Shakespeare. You will have a wonderful time with it. I highly recommend it. Thank you so much, Judith,
Thank
for this
you
delightful
so much.
conversation.
Again, please help me thank our moderator, Leslie Mallon, and our author, Judith Krummeck.
Thank you so much.
So as Leslie said, now's your chance to purchase a book. There are no excuses. Ivy Bookshop is outside those doors. If you haven't purchased a book, please do. Judith will be signing at the table. Thanks again for coming out.
I didn't even ask you about immigration because you spoke about it so eloquently to begin with.